New cases of the African swine fever have been discovered on a farm in Gauteng. The farm has now been quarantined and vets are identifying any other properties that may have been affected. Farms in Gauteng, the Free State and the Northwest are already under quarantine. Let's discuss the situation and get the latest from Animal Health Director at the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Mpho Maja. Good afternoon, Doc. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Just an overriding question first. I mean, in my intro there, I'm talking about a farm in Gauteng that's now been quarantined. That's the latest one. And then there's been others in the Free State and as well as in the, excuse me, in the Northwest. How bad is the situation?
So far, we only have one farm that has been confirmed in Gauteng, as you say. The farms in the Northwest and in the Free State have been placed under what we call precautionary quarantine because they either have direct contact with the farm that has been confirmed to be infected or indirect contact. By indirect contact, it could be that trucks may have delivered pigs to the farm or from the farm, or that the attending or state veterinarians may have attended to the infected farm and then later on went to visit these farms that are in the Free State and in the Northwest. So we place them under precautionary quarantine so that we can do epidemiological investigations and run some tests. And if they are found to be clear, then said quarantine will be lifted.
And that's those in the Northwest and the Free State. African swine fever
Correct.
Outbreak, is that normal? I mean, I haven't heard of this recently. I think you and I, the last time we spoke, we were speaking about the foot and mouth disease, which affects the cattle.
We used to have African swine fever only up in the north. That was an area that was endemic. And by endemic, we meant that there are vectors. It is transmitted by soft ticks. So there were soft ticks as well as warthogs that are carriers and permanent carriers of the infection. So that used to be our endemic area. Yeah. In the last 5 or so years, we have seen infection further south of that point. About a year or two ago, we've even demonstrated presence of the virus in warthogs in some game reserves in the Northern Cape. So that line has unfortunately moved down south. So we no longer have an area that we historically called free of ASF. So we've concluded that the whole country is infected or has the potential of being infected.
Yeah, just paint us a picture. I mean, what would happen if you don't bring this under control?
Unfortunately, African swine fever kills pigs. So once it gets introduced into a farm, we see high mortalities. So the owners lose production. It's also one of the very trade-sensitive diseases. So once we report it in our commercial flocks, or if it runs out of control, it affects trade significantly. You would probably know that some of our neighboring countries accept what we call compartments. So those are our high biosecure establishments, farms, that make sure that they do not introduce, amongst others, African swine fever. So we can still at least trade, even if there is infection outside of the compartment. But if we don't control it, it is going to affect production and unfortunately also affect the price that the consumer would have to pay for pork on the shelf.
Yeah, and the shortage that might happen. So finally, you said you're running tests currently in some of the farms in the Northwest and the Free State, which may have directly or indirectly been exposed to the affected farm in Gauteng. How long will this process take? By when will you be able to lift that precautionary quarantine in the Free State and the Northwest? It
really depends on the speed at which we get the information that we require. There are some premises where quarantine has already been lifted, where either the state vet of the private vet has demonstrated that the contact with the infected property was such that there is very low likelihood of that farm being infected. And then the test results came back negative. So it really depends on how quickly the collaboration between state and private vets that go and investigate take. If it's quick, then we will quickly resolve it. But if there is delays, then unfortunately, that affects the time frames.